Well, indeed, good afternoon. Welcome. You are on Kenyan Business Today. My name is Peter Akaba. On this day, Thursday, the 30th day of March, the year 2017. Again, I bid you welcome. Over the next 1 hour, as usual, we will endeavor to unpack for you, well, business headlines from this region, from within Kenya, and indeed from right across the world. Today is budget day for the year 2017. This budget is being read up to 2 months early, with the reason being, of course, the election that is looming later on in the year. This, of course, has thrown into a tailspin the usual exercise of reading the budget in tandem across the three East Africa countries, and of course Rwanda and maybe Burundi, who sometimes read the budget in September because they are a franc-denominated country. But of course the question is, what effect will this have on this economy and across the region? To unpack that and much more surrounding the budget, I have with me a studio panel that will seek to inform you on just these aspects of the budget. And with me in studio today, I have Rajesha. He is a senior tax partner at PwC. He is a man of great experience in the arena of taxation, budgeting, finance. Also with me in studio today, I have Lydia Dirango. She is an expert in transfer pricing. She is a senior manager at Ernst & Young, of course, bringing many years of experience into this conversation. And also in studio is Edward Nabangi. He is an auditor of many years standing. He works for the firm Nabangi and we are associates, and indeed will bring a devolution aspect to this because he is an expert in terms of audit, especially at the devolution perspective. Well, we also have with us in studio my colleague Ashley Mazuri, who is here in studio to unpack some of the numbers around the budget for us and be able to just crystallize what these numbers are this year. Of course, the fact that the budget has been a process. It used to be an event, but several years ago that has changed. So just what are these numbers? What are the different allocations this year? What were the allocations last year? What were the changes? What can we look forward to? And what are the timelines? Those are the things that she is here to tackle. So Ashley, well, over to you. Take it away.
How are you, Akaba, first of all?
I'm fine,
Let me ask you this. You're a Kenyan. What would you expect from the budget?
Well, for me, mostly the important thing around this budget is the fact that government has vowed not to increase any taxation.
Yes.
So most of us consumers were expecting a little more pain this year. People who consume things like cigarettes, alcohol, some women, of course, a lot of men do sometimes fork out a lot of cash towards some of these things that did get hit last year. So what is the perspective on those consumer products this year?
Yeah.
That is one of the things I'm waiting to really see.
Okay, all the best with that. But first, let's take a look at the budget outlook.
Yes.
In the financial year 2014-2015, Kenya was allocated 1.7 trillion shillings.
Yes.
In the financial year 2015-2016, we got 2.1 trillion shillings. Of course, there we are seeing around a 400 billion shillings increase. In the budget year 2016-2017, we got 2.3 trillion shillings.
Yes.
That is around 0.2 trillion shillings. And then finally, this year, we expect 2.6 trillion shillings. Well, that's around 3 trillion shillings, 0.3 trillion shillings more. Of course, there's also the issue of the deficit. We have
just before you go on, just to, of course, bring us, our readers, our viewers up to speed, the fact that a few months ago, this conversation would have been slightly different. The figure would have been 2.28 trillion shillings for the budget, but now we're at 2.6 trillion shillings because, as we said, budgeting is a process, and indeed some priorities did get brought into the budget. That's pushing it up by quite a few shillings, Ashley.
Okay, but with the issue of the deficit, what do you think is, in terms of being good for the country? Of course, we need to borrow more, we need to get more well-wishers. Then what happens to the country?
I had a conversation about that with one of our tax analysts who's here in studio, and indeed, while many Kenyans think that in absolute terms, this deficit is indeed growing. In the ratio of, this deficit to GDP in, statistically, it's still a constant that is still below 50%, and not really something that many Kenyans should be concerned about. That, of course, is his perspective. Other people would beg to differ, but that is part of what we will unpack getting into the discussion later on.
Okay, let's move on to the budget 2016-2017 highlights. Of course, we'll start looking at the gains. The energy sector got 120.2 billion shillings. Of course, this was to fast track development projects such as the geothermal development project, the power transmission project, the rural electrification program, of course, the last mile connectivity program, which just the other day got 6.6 billion for the upgrade. And then the agriculture sector got 4.9 billion shillings to subsidize fertilizer and 1.6 billion to food reserves. Of course, with the current situation, drought and everything, we need this kind of allocation. Maternal health care got 4.3 billion shillings. We seem to be having a problem with this, but this was mainly to support free maternal health care.
I want to take you slightly back, sorry to interrupt you right there, to the fact that we talked about the gains that have been made around things like energy. And this being capital intensive projects that require a lot of money up front. We have been told here in studio today that we should expect that the high voltage line between Mombasa and Nairobi, which is 400 kilovolt amperes, that is really high, should come on stream in the next 2 months, and that Kenyans can then start to enjoy the benefits of a much more efficient transmission system, and that we will see up to a 4 shilling gain in terms of cash that is off your bill directly. Ashley.
But if I may ask you, they've been telling us, for example, the last mile connectivity program was supposed to be done by April, and yet no updates so far. So do you think these 2 months will really be 2 months?
Well, it's not a perfect world. I know they're doing their best, but the thing about government is that there's lots of boxes to tick along the way. For example, building that line from Mombasa meant the relocation of different communities and their compensation in many different ways. This is supposed to be a simple exercise. But with the chaos around Kenya's land records, and then of course the political perspective, we've had instances where work completely had to stop because people were invading those pieces even after they had been paid to leave the same pieces of land. So this conversation, of course, being something that we continue to keep monitoring to see whether this will be delivered on time or not. Ashley.
Okay. So let's move on. We were at maternal health care, which was allocated 4.3 billion shillings. Of course, this was to support the maternal health care project that was introduced by the government in 2013. Of course, Mumias Sugar Company was allocated 2 billion shillings. We all know that Mumias has been struggling for the last couple of years or months. So this project was supposed to...
So quick question about Mumias. Do you think we're throwing good money after bad?
Well, that's a tricky question. Yes, and maybe not yes. It depends with how someone views it.
But anyway, Mumias is a listed company, and we know because we've done a few of those stories on the ground that there has been a consistent effort to turn that company around so far. Okay.
Let's move on to the tourism sector, which was allocated 4.5 billion shillings last year. Of course, tourism went through a lot in terms of low tourist numbers because of insecurity issues. So the 4.5 billion shillings was supposed to promote tourism activities. If we can move on to the losses, just a few, the informal sector taxation. Now, for the longest time, the informal sector has been exempted from taxation. Now, also, of course, from last year, they were included in taxation. Then there's the introduction of excise duty on kerosene. We are all aware that in 2011, the government reduced the taxes on this particular sector, but they reintroduced the excise duty because of the increased adulteration of fuel in the country. We can quickly go to the budget 2017-2018. Oh, sorry. The loss hike on cosmetics and beauty products prices.
This is particularly important for you, and you skip it.
Yes, for those who are into makeup. But then funny thing, immediately this particular policy was announced, retailers in, Du Bois and River Road started increasing their prices immediately. And many beauty, ladies, when you hear such a thing, you'd rush to get a supply of products before it is hiked. So when we got there, of course, you found out that the prices were already hiked.
Well, I'll tell you, because I got a bit of a powdering myself before I came into studio. This is especially important for me also, just to see whether the 10% excise duty that was slapped on this will remain, and indeed to be able to have a conversation on just what that has meant for that sector. Indeed, the conversation is that a lot of this had not in any significant way been contributing towards the economy, and that now they start to pay their way, whether they're SMEs or indeed whether they are corporate companies at the global level, Ashley.
But it's a pretty lucrative industry. Yes.
Definitely.
Okay, so now on to the budget 2017-2018. Of course, the budget projected at 2.6 trillion shillings.
Yes.
Of course, we don't expect major tax increase. The manufacturing industry just the other day was requesting for a stable tax system, which will help, of course, with the ease of doing business and growing the economy. We can move on to a healthy growth in revenue, even without tax increase. Of course, that is expected in this budget.
Let's stop right there, because I have two questions to pose here. Looking at the previous figure, 2.6 trillion shillings, in the middle of a drought, right? We have seen lots of listed companies, scores of them,
Yes.
post profit warnings, and indeed post really bad returns compared to other years.
But isn't this because of the interest cap?
Let me finish. We have seen the interest rates cap, which then has meant that lending to the private sector by banks has then slowed down. We have seen that because of the drought and other factors, provisioning for bad debt go up because SMEs and other players are not paying up their debt to the banks, right? And generally, we have a slowing economy because, well, that's what is happening for this part of the world.
Yes.
So how do you then reconcile that with a really optimistic budget at 2.6 trillion shillings?
Now, I think that is one of the questions that we should ask the CES of Treasury, of course, Henry
And one that
Rotich.
my panel will be tackling later on in the show.
Very able panel. Of course, now we can move on to the 2017-2018 allocation estimates.
Yes.
Now we can see agriculture has been allocated 46.6 billion shillings, mainly to enhance the strategic food reserves, establishment of crop and cattle insurance. The energy infrastructure and ICT has been allocated 509.4 billion shillings for projects such as LAPSED, the standard gauge railway, which is soon going to be, running up and running. And of course, the digital literacy program, which has been ongoing for a few months. We can move on to the general economic and commerce affairs, which has been allocated 19.9 billion shillings. Of course, this is to promote sectors like tourism, to increase earnings in these sectors, and also to reduce non-tariff barriers. The health sector has been allocated 60.9 billion shillings, which is for the rehabilitation of hospitals across the country, and of course for the maternal healthcare project that has been ongoing. The education system has been allocated 349.9 billion shillings. There it is. Mainly to recruit more training teachers, additional teachers, which is around 5,000. And of course, enhancing technical and vocational education in the country, which is nowadays a big deal. And lastly, national security has been allocated 126.1 billion shillings. Of course, this is just among what we're expecting from the CES Henry Rotich this afternoon, actually in just a few minutes.
Well, indeed, Ashley, quite an insightful conversation there. Indeed, the fact that in just about 40 minutes and 26 seconds,
yes,
we expect to be able to cross live to Parliament, where indeed the budget statement, the process to table that before Parliament, and indeed before the country should start to roll out the CS for Treasury, there, Henry Rotich, of course, being expected to table that shortly. Well, before we proceed on that, the fact that this budget, of course, is against a background of several different things. One of them, of course, is the fact that there are a lot of manufacturers who feel that Kenya is now an ideal place and has indeed tackled this ease of doing business agenda and want to come into the country. The latest being Iveco, which is the Industrial Vehicles Corporation. And these guys came in earlier on in the year and have said that they are going to set up, well, a factory here not in Nairobi, but in Mombasa, and expect that this will enable them start to crystallize the Kenyan dream of starting to produce vehicles here locally and for the local and regional markets. Well, we now want to proceed with that conversation as earlier promised. And of course, standing by with me here in studio has been the fact that we continue to see a varied reaction across the country due to the fact that the budget is being read here today. And that conversation, of course, being just 39 minutes away now. and some seconds and counting. And with me in studio to, well, crystallize that, as earlier indicated, we have with us Lydia Dirango. She is a senior manager at Ernst & Young. We also have Edward Nabangi. He is an auditor of many years, indeed decades experience. His personal brand of expertise is around devolution and taxation. And of course, we have Rajesha, who is senior partner for tax at PwC. Karibuni sana. Now, just about 38 minutes to go, and of course, this having to be a very fast conversation. I wanted to start off with you, Rajesh, and to simply ask, this budget seems to be rather ambitious. Do you think we will be able to achieve what we have set out to do? Will we be able to raise the kind of revenue that we are targeting right there?
Peter, I think ambitious might be a good word or might be interpreted differently. I think it's a budget which continues with the plans and intentions that you've seen over the last 3-4 years, certainly since the government came into power. Yeah. So there's nothing new as such in the budget itself. It's about completion of the projects they've intended to, so when you talk about ambition, I think we need to remember one thing. If you look at the current budget, or to say 10 years ago, we were actually sometimes borrowing money to finance our recurrent expenditure. At least now, we as a country, we are actually borrowing to finance development expenditure. So if the spend is not going to be there, it's unlikely the government will be borrowing, either from the local market or through the international markets, or even getting support from our international funding partners. Yeah. So, and we have seen that. Although last year we said it was going to be 2.3 trillion shillings. I was saying dollars. We're not in the country yet. We'll have those numbers yet. And so I think we'll have to see. Ambitious, yes, but it is ambition that we must complete things we have started.
Yes, definitely. Indeed, coming to you, Edward, the fact that, and indeed welcome to studio, that this budget is ambitious also because it endeavors to continue the conversation around devolution, moving money from the centers to the counties. Do you think we have been able to live up to that promise in subsequent budgets to date?
No, I think as far as moving money is concerned,
yes,
we can say the budget is ambitious. Mm-hmm. However, we are trying to encourage the county governments, yes, to monitor the budget by forming relevant budget committees, mm-hmm, which have not been there in most of the counties. Mm-hmm. So as long as the budget committees are formed, the budget is really monitored, the spending is monitored in the counties, mm-hmm, then we shall achieve what we want to achieve. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We've had the concerns around fast absorption. Secondly, lack of capacity, first to absorb and then to police this sort of consumption of the funds that have been set aside at the county level. Do you think putting in place these committees will then start to enable us roll out those measures?
The budget committees will be monitoring how the money allocated is spent, and then they make periodic reports to the executive at the counties, like the variances. Yes. They are supposed to spend this, but they have maybe overspent when the year is not over. Mm-hmm. So we encourage the formation of budget committees at the county level so that the budget actually are monitored.
Would these include funds that have been generated by counties by themselves, from things like parking fees, levies, and that sort of thing, not just the allocation?
No, you see, a budget also takes into account, yes, the locally generated revenue. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it is all to be monitored, mm-hmm, because it's also public funds. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Lydia, just to bring you in, this is the local conversation around funds that sometimes have to be generated even internationally. And you're an expert when it comes to transfer pricing, trade misinvoicing, that sort of thing. For a lot of counties, the fact of the matter has been that they play host to multinationals, which are considered national assets. Case in point, I think Kwale with base titanium, we have Turkana with the oil. How do you then reconcile the conversation that he's talking about, where you need to build capacities to police these players locally, while still being able to play at a global stage in terms of ability and professionalism?
Okay, thanks for that question. And I think two things have to be separated, where we have to look at what taxes the national government can collect and then what the counties can collect. Because when it comes to corporation tax, that one will definitely go first to the national government.
Yes.
But when it comes to if there's any levy to be paid,
Or
then
cess.
it will, yes, or cess, it will have to go to the county. So what I think needs to be done is there has to be proper cooperation between the counties and the national government, so that even the reports that the multinational are reporting to the national government, the county has to be able to confirm that exactly this is what we've done, whereby now they can say we have invested this much, and the person in county can actually check for them and not the person in national government to be sent there, so that to save costs. Because what you'll find is that there's a lot of duplication now that the different counties are being set up. There's a lot of duplication at the national level and at the county level. So this needs to be addressed, and what you'll find is that when there's proper duty allocation and the duplication is reduced, it will save on cost.
Edward, do you think we're doing enough to be able to do what she's saying, that empower the counties while ensuring that these roles are not duplicated at national government by people who are sitting far away in Nairobi?
No, that's true, Peter. What do we do for the national government? They are supposed to insist on reports.
Yes.
Yeah, of variances on performance or budget monitoring.
Yes.
So we build the capacity at the county level, and then the national government is going to get reports on agreed templates, yeah, like quarterly or monthly.
Yes.
Yeah, showing how the budgets have been spent or how the money has been spent, whether it's within or without a budget. Yeah.
Rajesh, PwC is one of the larger, in fact, we say one of the big four in this country. And the Auditor General's office has time and again said that it does not have the requisite capacity to be able to police some of the things that we are talking about here. Do you think there is room for them to start to, so to say, to give this work to other people at national, at county, and even at other levels? Because this office is actually stretched. Yet we have counties which are supposed to table these reports once in a while, and some of them are 3 years back in terms of audit.
Interesting, Peter. Yeah, I think that sort of support is been provided to the Auditor General, obviously, when it comes to auditing of state corporations and everything.
Yes.
But yeah, I think it's useful then to think through now, what about at the government level itself? What can we do in terms of capacity building? And I think the government is already looking at some of those aspects. So initially, obviously, it will be through resource support for others doing the work. But at the end of the day, I think the government has to take the steps to build the capacity in themselves. And I can clearly see an agenda building around technical support, where the Office of the Auditor General can be supported with how to build capacity for his office, such that it's not then 3 years, but it's within the time speculated in the Physical Public Finance Management Act, which talks about audits have to be done by a certain point in time. Edward, I don't know what that date is. It says within 6 months you must have your accounts ready and finalized and audited.
Would we be able to then tender these out to private individuals, private companies, private corporations that can take up these roles in one way or another and then play that role under the supervision of the office?
They can, but at the end of the day, capacity has to be built. I mean, I can't see right now, even if I look at the existing capacity within the firms themselves, they will be able to even carry out, meet those deadlines which are there. So as a country, we have to definitely focus on capacity building. And if I look at the institute which I'm a member of, it's something we're consciously working towards, helping build capacity and skills around public finance.
And Edward, let me come back to you before going to Lydia. The fact of the matter is that we've seen a lot of revenue leakage. It's one of the reasons that we don't often generate as much revenue as we would like. And secondly, the fact that even after it's generated, a lot of it goes away in terms of corruption, which we see reported all over the place. What are the measures that can be put in place to tighten some of these loopholes?
One of the ways is to have timely audit.
Yes.
Yeah. Let us not wait to have the 3-4 years as my colleague has said. Is when now you have an audit. No. Let's introduce timely audit. If possible, what is called interim audit. Before the end of financial year, the Controller General has already perused the books. That will act as a moral restraint on the officers running the ministries or in charge of finance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lydia, coming to you, Chapter 6 of the Constitution had originally set out a whole raft of measures to ensure that individuals in government and other stakeholders literally are on the straight and narrow when it comes to public funds. This has been frittered away in many various ways. What are the ways that we can then begin to say that we are retracing our steps to get to what was originally intended? Because as we talk about 2.6 trillion shillings, there are many Kenyans asking themselves just how much of this will actually get used for what it was intended.
I think it goes back to the issue of proper governance and then also the timely audit that has been discussed. And when looking at it critically, you have to look at when somebody has been given allocated funds for be it development, there has to be proper review, even if it means on a quarterly basis, tracing back our steps and seeing what have we achieved in terms of the money that has been first disbursed to you, and then thereafter, and then you can get the second batch of investment. And what you'll see is that the government is really trying in terms of fighting corruption. And even when you look at in this budget, there's been a proper allocation whereby there's allocation to the anti-ethics corruption, and then also to the DBP to the tune of around 5 billion, so that to actually go back and let's try and correct the past mistakes and also look at ways of how better can we move forward.
Okay. Indeed, insightful conversation there. The fact that corruption continues to be a thorn in the flesh of many Kenyans, and that the governance conversation does need to be heightened to tackle that. Well, let's just hold the thoughts here for a minute, especially because my colleague Abi Agena has been standing by at Parliament. Of course, the time now being some 26 minutes and 32 seconds to go till 3 o'clock, when we expect the CS for the National Treasury, Henry Rotich, to be able to table the budget statement and tell Kenyans what to expect over the next 1 year. Abi, indeed, I know it's been a busy morning for you and getting much busier now that it's approaching 3 o'clock. What is the sentiment on the ground at Parliament?
Well, many thanks, Wakab. The mood here at Parliament is many people are quite expectant, especially the members of Parliament, as the Jubilee administration tables its last budget in office. And of course, many were hoping to see what taxation measures will the government be targeting towards raising revenue. We're talking about 1.7 trillion shillings that is expected to be collected by the tax authority, that is the Kenya Revenue Authority. Over and above that, a number of the legislators here will be keen on seeing what other aspects will the government be prioritizing investments moving forward. And let me bring in the Member of Parliament for Suba and also the chairman of, chairman for ODM, as well as the member of the Budget Committee, that is John Mbadi. Many thanks, Mheshimiwa. We are in a transition budget of sorts where a government in power is heading towards an election. What will be the spending priorities as we head to the polls?
I think what we need to understand is that already we know where the government is allocating the resource envelope. The budget estimates had been presented to Parliament. No much differences with the previous budgets in terms of priorities. I still see the Jubilee administration, apart from factoring in about 100 billion shillings extra for the public service sector wages, I see more money being allocated to the same projects, that is infrastructure, is taking a huge chunk of our budget, and money going to the same usual ministries like agriculture and water. So there is nothing really much in terms of priorities spending for this budget, and there is also the issue of putting a little bit more resources to IBC, but it should be understood that this budget is really going to take effect from 1st of July. So for the remaining part of the Jubilee government's tenure, it is a budget that is really not going to be felt. It's not going to be spent by this government, so to speak, because really for ministries to prepare even their work plans and to be able to absorb this budget will be way past August 8th of this year. So this is a budget that really is not capturing the mood of what Jubilee wants to tell the country. But what I think they are going to try to do this afternoon in terms of revenue-raising measures, I expect or suspect that there will be a lot of PR pronouncements regarding what may look as sugary and flowery proposals to make life easy for Kenyans. But as to whether that would really be actualized is debatable, because I want to hear deliberate efforts to ensure that the cost of living is lowered, because that is a major concern that we have today. How are we going to spur more investment so that we create more job opportunities? And I think the CS will try, because this is being an election year and the last budget, will try to really try to court Kenyans by making pronouncements that may sound juicy, but in real sense may not be implementable.
Interesting. And perhaps looking at this budget as well, Mbadi, analysts have come out saying we are going to see a sort of election spending budget where the government will look at projects that are more than halfway complete and channel more resources towards that so that they are able to fast track these projects. Do you feel this is what is going to happen?
Yeah, that's what actually they've tried to do. If you look at their locations in the infrastructure, they've put quite a bit. But I think they're late in what they are doing at the moment, because really this budget, the Jubilee administration will not be able to use it for campaigns in whichever way. What they should have done was to allocate those resources in the previous years so that the projects by now would be running and ongoing. But what we are seeing is, I think, because we have challenged them previously, that you are trying to start projects telling people tunazindua hii na tunazindua hii. Can you tell us where the money is in the budget? So I think they have tried to push a little bit more resources to that, so that when they move around in the remaining months, they will be telling people it's already in the budget of 2017-2018, which budget really is not their budget. The budget of 2017-2018 is the budget of the government that will be in power after August 8th, and I expect that that should be our budget as NASA.
All right. And Mbadi, moving forward right now, of course, we've seen a lot of Kenyans wanting to see a trickle-down effect, a mwananchi budget that is centered really on the common man who is currently facing inflation of 9.04%.
Yes.
The people also experiencing high food prices. The rents have hit the roof.
Yes.
Perhaps, what do you think the CS should really use as a magic wand in this budget speech?
You see, if you ask me, that should have happened in the budget allocations, in the estimates. We should have seen more resources put in the agriculture sector to ensure that we have better provision of food to Kenyans in the coming years. But for the moment, because we have been hit seriously hard by the cost of living, the government should come up with ways of cushioning the less privileged members of our society, because it has become a crisis. Kenyans are suffering, especially those of us, those Kenyans who are not able to manage an income of more than maybe $2 a day. So the people, the less privileged Kenyans, I expect the CS to talk about how are we cushioning, given that the weather pattern is not favorable. You look at the rain patterns is not favorable, and yet already we are facing starvation. We have issues of drought and the cattle. So we expect this budget. We need to be told how then those Kenyans who are pastoralists, how they are going to be helped to come out of this mess that they are already finding themselves in. But in a nutshell, to help address or mitigate the current cost of living that has hit the roof is to cushion the less privileged. What systems are there? And two, how then do we mitigate this apparent possibility of lack of food even going forward? Because that, to me, food is everything. Yeah, without a provision of food, then the society would really affected.
And finally, Mbadi, Now that we are going into the elections, we know that part of the budget for 2016-2017 was heavily towards ensuring IEBC is properly resourced. Yes. And of course, the judiciary also was one of the big winners in the last election, in the last budget, really. Do you feel the elections and the electoral process will be getting a lion's share this time around?
No, I don't expect much to be allocated now to IEBC, because really IEBC for their August 8 election, the resources should have been provided in 2016-2017 financially. And again, during the supplementary budget, we saw more resources being pushed to IEBC, because this budget, as I said, will take effect from 1st July.
All right.
You don't expect IEBC to wait until 1st July to start accessing funds to prepare for our elections. Maybe just putting a little more resources to deal with the after election events that would involve IEBC, maybe electoral disputes and cases, money to be payable to the lawyers, and possibly if there is a possibility of a runoff, then how do we resource it? That, I think, can be captured in this budget. But above all, there is the issue of preparing, if there is a runoff, that preparation, the time between the election and the time of the runoff, you need again to prepare. It's like you are preparing for another election. Right. So there should be some allocation to cater for possibility of a runoff.
And Mbadi, lastly, the elephant in the room around the budget has been, of course, the high public wage bill, standing at about 627 billion shillings. Do you feel we need to take on austerity measures as the president proposed in the State of the Nation address?
The figure of 600 billion is still disputable. Actually, as a position, we have come out to say that that figure a lot of times is exaggerated. We know the actual wage bill, but that's not to say that the wage bill is not a concern. It is a concern. Austerity measures has been talked about, but I think in this country what we face as the serious challenge, the most serious challenge, is corruption. If we fix corruption, I don't think we should even belabor much on the wage bill. We would be able to pay our public servants decent salary. I think we are still not paying our public servants the salary that they should be paid. But as I conclude, another mistake with our public service is duplication of duties. I think we need to rationalize. There's duplication. If you come to the headquarters here, a ministry like Agriculture, which is almost 100% devolved, still has the same number of staff that we had before the advent of the new constitution. And I think it is irrational, it is irresponsible, and it is clear wastage.
Many thanks there, John Mbadi, speaking to us, a member of the Budget Committee, as well as a member of Parliament for Suba constituency, just sharing his insights on the budget and what to expect. And he is quite particular, indicating that he'd like to see that this year's budget to be mwananchi focused, and it should be able to tackle issues around the high cost of commodities in the market. And of course, also pointing to the fact that corruption needs to be fixed, and if the government is to ensure that the economy grows at the projected rate of 6%, we need to put a lead really on corruption. And of course, we are coming to you live from Parliament here in Nairobi, and we can see now a huge number of various leaders coming in. That is the CS for the interior, actually, and Kaiseri making his way into Parliament. We also have there a member of the Budget Committee, and that is Oburu Oginga, just strolling in as we prepare for the budget reading, expected from about, it was actually expected to start at 2 p.m. It's stretched a bit, and it is 2:43 p.m. and waiting to hear and listen more from the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury. Of course, this is the last budget statement that will be coming from the Jubilee administration in their first term in office, and many saying it's more of a transitionary budget where they'll be keen to ensure there's continuity when they clinch power come the elections, and if they don't the next administration will have to tinker around with the budget, the supplementary budget, really, if this comes to pass. So we continue to give you our special coverage here from the National Assembly, and quite an expectant members here in the House, Wakaba, and of course we'll be speaking to more and more of the legislators, the senators, the members of parliament, just to pick their minds on what they feel about the budget and what would they like to see addressed moving forward. So for now, Wakaba, that's what we have established. We are yet to see the CS Henry Rotich. He's yet to make his way here, but we've seen a number of Treasury officials already here. We've seen the cabinet secretaries coming in, such as for infrastructure, James Masharia. We've also seen Sports CS Hassan Wario, among other principal secretaries. So perhaps an indication that we might be starting anytime from now, and we'll be keeping you posted from this end. Wakaba.
Well, indeed, Abi, thank you very much for that update right there. It is indeed 13 minutes to the top of the hour and some seconds, about 20 seconds to 3 o'clock, when we do expect that Treasury doors will open and the march for the Cabinet Secretary towards, of course, Parliament will start, and the process, of course, of tabling and reading the budget statement for the year 2017-2018 can, of course, officially start off. Raising quite pertinent questions there in that conversation there with the chairman of ODM, John Mbadi. And of course, the perspective has been that there has been a lot of conversation around the wage bill, some saying that this is overly bloated, something that we do need a bit of rationalization. Well, depending on who you ask again. Coming back to the discussion around the budget, and of course, my panel still here in studio with me. And the question we want to delve into now is, at 2.6 trillion shillings and with a deficit of about depending on who you ask, about 1 billion shillings, 900 billion shillings, where exactly is this money going to come from? How are we going to raise the revenue that is collected locally from the 842 billion that was raised last year to the over 1 trillion that is expected to be raised this year? What kind of magic will it take? That's a question we want to put to the panel right now. So Rajesh, what do you think they will have to do to make up these amounts that we have seen on this budget?
Yeah, so Peter, thanks. That's a very good question. Because at the end of the day, we as a country finance our expenditure from tax revenues primarily. That's our main source of revenues for the government. And if you look at it, they're planning an ambitious growth in that revenue compared to last year, or the June year, and which will come soon. The question is, if the government is saying that we want to give predictability around and certainty around tax, that means it's unlikely we'll see changes in tax rates, whether it's in income tax or VAT or excise. Excise is in a way taken care of because there's an inflationary adjustment is already built in into the excise system. So I can't see them increasing the principal taxes themselves. So it's going to really, again, down to the Kenya Revenue Authority, been a bit more focused on what I call attracting potential taxpayers. You know, there are likely people out there who are not simply paying taxes. So one of the focuses has to be around expanding the tax net to bring more